Utah politics.
Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Glenn Mills. It is time to go inside Utah politics. We do begin this morning with Robert Gerke as a political columnist with the Salt Lake Tribune. Always glad to have you on the show. Thanks so much for being here with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I was enamored by an article you wrote recently, really digging into the DUI law here in the state of Utah. We all remember 5 years ago in 2017, as that was pushed through, what was said, what happened. But you come to the conclusion after looking at the numbers, not as advertised at this point. Talk about that.
Yeah, so when it first took effect, 2019 was the first year it took effect, we saw a big drop in DUI deaths. And then the year after that, and the year after that, and the year after that, it's gone up and up and up to the point where we've had the three highest years of DUI deaths in the past 3 years. And so you've got to ask the question, are we targeting the wrong thing? And in my mind, we are. That it's not these people who are 0.05 to 0.8 who are causing these crashes. It's the people who have higher blood alcohol, over 0.1, 0.15 in some cases, and that's where we need to be looking, focusing our efforts. If we're targeting these people and putting people in jail for these marginal blood alcohol levels, we're not actually making the road safer. We're just putting people in jail.
Let's dig into that a little more, because you brought up a specific figure. Somewhere around 2,100 people have been arrested on DUI under the old limit.
Under the old limit.
Talk about the impact that has.
Well, I mean, there's obviously big fines that go with that. There's impound fees, there's insurance hikes. A suspended license can affect people's work potential. And so, there are severe consequences that come with these DUIs, and we're not seeing the public safety benefit on the other side. I think it was oversold. I think the 0.05 benefits were oversold. And I think I don't think the legislature is actually going to repeal 0.05. It would be kind of unthinkable that they would go the opposite direction. But I think maybe we need to start talking about maybe lowering the fines and penalties for those who are in that 0.05 to 0.08 range.
Kind of like an escalated potential?
An escalated thing, yeah. We've seen this in other countries, other states, where it's more of an infraction, not a Class B misdemeanor or a Class A misdemeanor.
You also brought up kind of a head scratcher as to how many more DUIs we see at higher levels as opposed to the lower levels. Talk about that and what potentially could be some answers, if there are any, behind that.
Yeah. I mean, I think the data would indicate that the people who are most often arrested have high blood alcohol contents and have multiple arrests prior. And so, we're maybe not getting the benefits we're maybe not focusing enough on those people and seeing, consequently not seeing the benefits of the impact of the law.
So to your point, someone at 0.04 facing the same consequences as someone maybe double the legal limit.
Yeah, and there can be enhancements for people who have multiple offenses in the past.
Sure.
And there are enhancements if you have a really high, like I think it's over 0.16. But there was one person who was arrested in the past year who had a 0.46 blood alcohol content, which is just hard to imagine.
I mean, how were they even walking?
How are they walking
to the vehicle?
Much less, they should not be behind the wheel. And so, but lowering the blood alcohol level for a DUI doesn't keep that person off the road.
Right.
And so we've really got to focus the efforts, I think, on where we can make an impact.
You also make an important point in that article that I want to make as well. We're not advocating for driving at 0.04 to 0.07 by any means.
Absolutely not. It's just really difficult, though, for a consumer to know when they're at 0.04 versus 0.05, a server, and it's hard for a police officer. When the law was taking effect, we did this experiment with a police officer who had to come in and administer, field sobriety tests after, people had had a certain number of drinks, and it's really difficult for them to know when that person is inebriated or a risk behind the wheel.
These numbers were going to go before a legislative committee recently. It ended up getting pulled off. Do you make anything of that?
No, I was surprised they pulled it off, but it was the week of the special session, and so I think they had a lot on their plate. The Department of Public Safety is still sort of scrubbing the numbers. They have to verify every one of those that's reported as a DUI fatality, so maybe there was some delay there, but I don't think it was anything nefarious.
Okay. Fascinating conversation there, and I'm sure that'll come back up, and we'll see more about that. Another big thing that you wrote about just the other day is the the upset at the Republican convention for the special election.
Yeah.
Celeste Malloy taking home the nomination there. That really caught a lot of people off guard. How was she able to pull off that upset? Generally speaking, then we'll get into some of the specifics you bring up in your article.
Yeah, I mean, she was relatively unknown going into it. You know, it was a crowded field already. Everybody I was talking to, I think you would probably agree, was anticipating that Greg Hughes was going to emerge the winner there. Celeste was a staffer for Chris Stewart, and so she got his endorsement, which I think gave her instant credibility. And so, you know, when we saw those first rounds of voting, and Greg wasn't quite as far out in front of everybody as we thought, and you had Jordan Hess and Celeste Malloy sort of, you know, neck and neck, it showed there might be some trouble for him. And in each subsequent round, they closed that gap. And I think Jordan Hess coming out before the last round of voting and endorsing Celeste was a huge boost for her, because he was, you know, at that point in third place. I think what we saw, and we were talking about it before, is Southern Utah has a powerful block of voters, and she, you know, is from Southern Utah. Jordan Hess was from Southern Utah, and I think between those two, they were able to coalesce that Southern Utah vote and really kind of put her over the top.
Even so, I'm surprised at that, because if you take a look at Greg Hughes and where his base is, it is from those southern counties, especially if you break down how he did in the governor's race. He did very well in those counties, so that was a bit of a surprise. But I want to point out one thing. Not only did the numbers we saw going into this say it would be Greg Hughes, but she wasn't in the top two even.
Right.
Going in.
Yeah, I don't think anybody really anticipated. Everybody I was talking to thought it was going to be Greg Hughes and maybe Jordan Hess could make a run. But yeah, I mean, I think she stuck around. She was able to, you know, solidify, get that endorsement from Jordan at the end. But yeah, more than half of the voters, more than half of the delegates are from outside of the Salt Lake Davis County area.
That surprised me when I read that.
Yeah, and so I think it sets her up very well for a potential to win that primary in September.
Yeah, so we're looking at two potential candidates to get on the ballot as well, in Becky Edwards and Bruce Huff. You have talked to them, I've talked to both of them. They feel pretty confident about getting there. If both of them are on, you have to take a look at what you just talked about and say that favors Celeste.
I think the demographics of the district make it really hard for either Edwards or Huff, and if they're both there splitting that sort of Davis-Salt Lake vote, I think it makes it almost impossible, and I think it puts her in a very, very good position. Now, this is all assuming that this talk about whether Celeste is eligible to be the party's nominee. You know, there's rumors or the discussion about whether she was eligible because she had lived in Virginia and hadn't voted in the past two elections. Was she eligible under the Republican bylaws to be their nominee? I don't think that's going to, you know, trip her up. I just don't see that getting enough momentum, enough traction with party leadership, and there's really not much that they can do. So I think right now you'd have to be smart. Smart money would be on Celeste to be the next Congresswoman.
In your article, you bring up what you call the China hit piece. It came out just a couple days before convention. It was basically an older piece of reporting from several years ago when Hughes was the Speaker of the House. What impact do you think that had?
You know, I think it did have some impact. I know, talking to the candidates after the convention, they were getting a lot of questions about China. Greg felt like he had to address it in one of his speeches before the voting, which, you know, the old adage, if you're explaining, you're losing. So I think he thought it was hurting him and felt like he needed to address it, and so it definitely had some impact. We don't know how much, but it definitely had some impact.
You already brought up the endorsement. Typically in election, I think that has very little impact, but it appears that Stewart's name probably did bump her up.
Yeah, I think it put her in the mix, right? It elevated her from sort of that second tier of candidates in a crowded field and made the voters, made the delegates really pay attention to her and consider her as an option.
All right. Robert Gerke, always appreciate your insight. Where can our viewers follow your work?
Yeah, follow me at sltrib.com or at Robert Gerke on Twitter.
All right. I always appreciate it. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks, Glenn.
Coming up, more on the 2nd Congressional District.